We are losing critical knowledge. A good school teaches you how to think, but good schools are not common. You see, a person who knows how to think can see through the toughest of lies, can stay in line with their principles, take responsibility and control of their life, and feel solace in that. But the world runs on abuse. Tell people that you have the answer, and then you can strip them for all they're worth. Or better yet, make them do your bidding their whole life, never even realizing what you've done to them. Maybe they'll confusedly be grateful, not realizing the evil you've done, and follow you for generations. So before I say anything more, let me present you the most mundane, sub-spectacular, but foundational building blocks to the psyche of the human mind. These are things that people intuitively develop before speech is possible, because it is exactly these distinctions that our brain makes which pave the way for language. First is the law of identity, the equation A equals A, the assertion so seemingly ordinary to be so powerful, and it is. Basically, a thing, a variable, whatever it is that A describes, must be exactly equivalent to itself. It's like saying 1 equals 1 or 2 equals 2. There isn't even math happening yet, really. It's the most fundamental component to what can even become an equation. In layman's terms, a thing is itself. The next law, the law of non-contradiction. The equation is A does not equal not A. A thing cannot be the antithesis of itself or tolerate any level of deviance from itself, because it is definitionally itself. This doesn't mean that something with the properties of A couldn't become something with the properties of not A through some different process, but these processes, the variables that they introduce which facilitate any change necessarily, change the description of the original variable. And so thus A stops being A and becomes not A. To clarify, not A describes the totality of possibilities which reside outside of the variable constraint, A. It's not like shadow link or something. It's just all things that aren't A. Which does push us naturally into the third and final fundamental law of logic, the law of excluded middle. In a dark room, a light pushes away the darkness as far as you can see. You say, "It's too dark to see beyond that point." Or maybe, "It's not light enough to see past this point." While the gradation of light may exist to a point beyond your deference, your engagement with it as a subject, observing seeable spaces, hones in naturally on practical application. You speak of the things you see and the things you don't see. Things of questionable confidence are ultimately either accepted or rejected as reliable information. Another example. A supporter of the channel, Liz, sent me this obsidian ball a couple of years ago. When it exists here, it is A, and here, it is not A. What about here? The middle. Well, ultimately, if any part of it falls outside of A, it by definition cannot wholly be A. If it narrowly touches the edge, but does not cross, it is still A. Because again, the variable of what it is. Or maybe it would make more sense if I just put the ball on its stand. It's either on its stand or off its stand. It cannot be partially on the stand because any level of being on the stand is being on the stand. I hope you're following with bated breath. Now, I realize that the intuitive truth of these is not emotionally stirring for most people, but that's simply because of their inherent instrumental nature to our reality being so strong. It's something so true that it's unremarkable to point it out, but it is important to understand it. It's the example of a fish not knowing that they're in water. A equals A is more or less developed at the point of object permanence that babies go through. That's why Peekaboo is a classic for children. It actually teaches them object permanence. Babies have to use trial and error to develop a theory of mind and world, and curiously engage with the world desperately to try and bridge the communication barrier they have with their caretakers. That is, once they are aware of their surroundings, the law of identity, A equals A, is part of the object permanence test. When mom and dad disappear behind their hands, they aren't literally popping in and out of reality like magic. They are simply moving to a place temporarily out of your sight. This requires the infant to conceptualize themselves as actors within a 3D space and understand that while different from the others that you see, the other actors in this 3D space that communicate with you are independent of yourself. This is part of understanding reality as a 3D traversable space, and yourself as a subject within that space. Rather than your eyes projecting a screen onto you, the core audience member in a lifelong play directed just for you, to put things how a toddler could understand, this is this. This is not that. Something can't be this and that, even if you were to forcibly merge this and that. Whatever would be made would neither be this or that. It would be something entirely new. If there's any reservation, it's possible that you may be thinking about the distinction between cases and objects. Immanuel Kant expanded on this with his noumenon versus phenomenon, where the noumenon is the thing itself and the phenomenon is more of our perception of a thing. But I actually think Ferdinand de Saussure, which I probably said wrong, but it sounded cool to me, gets the idea across more clearly with the signifier and signified, at least for our purposes. We often don't think about the distinction between our expression of a concept and the concept to which we are asserting our expression towards. It's something so subtle that it's never anything that we stop to think about. When we see a store clerk with a name tag, we understand the tag is a name signifier for the person. The person isn't biologically linked to that name or that tag, but that name is constructed of symbols, sounds, and letters that, through a collective understanding of knowledge, logic, and the rules of grammar, we're able to pronounce, speak, and communicate. The same way everyone has a rough image if I told them to draw a tree, which sometimes comes from a synthesis of associations with real plants that we associate with trees. There may be some additional appeal, subconscious or otherwise, to think about how trees have traditionally been represented by others in order to better communicate your tree drawing. I always drew my trees with a little owl hole and a slightly off-symmetry look, and a vague brown oak, I guess. I don't know. It's like stick figure level, obviously. But I barely ever even saw trees with the owl hidey hole. But I saw them enough in art to be exposed to that, to decide I liked it, and to integrate it, even though it didn't actually fit my personal experience of the object I was asserting truth of reality about. So it became part of my association with the signified. Signifiers contextualize aspects of shared reality into compact information bytes. Our grammar allows us to structure these bits of signified reality, allowing us to specify and direct more and more complex concepts. These concepts then compact and compile over and over until we're at the point we are now, standing on the shoulders of giants, where we can just take a little pill and the headache goes away. You could have one of the most important jobs for our future, to understand a piece of our world, and to protect that knowledge, to carry it on to the next generation, as past generations have, at this point, failed. That starts with grounding confidence in reality. Something is only instrumental to someone as far as it is a practical improvement to them. If you can't tie your beliefs to reality, you can't tie it to anything any person has experienced. And so you can never have confidence that you have something positive to offer. But you can always have confidence in something that shows itself repeatedly to be true. Not because it fits an abstract ideal of certainty, but because the likelihood of it not being certain is perceptibly lower than the alternatives. We are forced to behave with instrumentality in mind by our very biology, to seek out practical benefits to ourselves, and to seek out which benefits we personally desire. We have needs for fundamental and mental well-being. Our body recoils at pain, and pain can be anywhere. So fundamentally, when someone is forced into this quagmire, it takes a moment of reflection to snap out and ask yourself if you're the really one in control of your life. And not in like a weird puppet master sense, but I mean like, are you controlling your own body? To me, it invokes Jonathan Haidt, a psychologist who I don't particularly like in the current day, or recommend broadly, but he has an idea from a very old book, The Happiness Hypothesis, and the idea of the elephant and the rider, and it's a brilliant metaphor that continues to stick with me as a clear and powerful portrayal of this idea. The rider is at the whim of the elephant. Although the rider holds the reins, plots the course, and can see far out above the tree line, Ultimately, if the elephant wants to stop, graze, change direction, anything else, the rider can do very little to get the elephant onto a specific course, and oftentimes will have to maybe even manipulate or bargain to get the elephant to do its work. So as us, the we that we perceive ourselves of, as through our rationally intelligible mind, intelligibility constructs our understanding of reality, but our physical body can have any number of dysregulations, abnormalities, or inconsistencies across our life. Our minds are affected by states of our bodies. Our bodies sometimes fight our mind. So even if we will that something be done, it feels impossible for us to do it, or even get out of bed. This is when the elephant and the rider are in conflict and ultimately stuck. These misalignments in the feelings and logical states of the brain making perceiving reality fairly and constantly, even to a practical degree, a huge struggle for people. However, true practicality comes about from an understanding of reality and the ways that parts of reality interact with one another. That's something that has to be seen with slow observance, intense study, and reflection. Let's say you're sick in the Middle Ages. Someone coats you in 20 spices and plants to make you feel better, and practically it worked. But it does not mean that the 20 spices and plants did the work. It could be that one specific spice out of the 20, or a specific combination of 2 of the 20. But it does not mean that 20 spices and the other plants all did the work. It could be that 1 or even 2 of the specific spices or one specific plant had the medicinal things desired, and the others did nothing. Now, objectively, you see, it would be far less wasteful for the practitioner to give the sick person the relevant ailment rather than tossing the kitchen sink in and seeing what works. It shows that while something may seem practically efficacious, we may still misunderstand why it is efficacious or practically works. And that through better understanding how it practically works, we're able to isolate those variables. Now the hypothetical practitioner wastes a tiny fraction of their goods compared to a huge amount before, while serving as many, if not plenty more sick clients due to the abundance of resources. Interrogating the practical benefits of things and better understanding them always leads to improved practical solutions. The thing is, we are at a point after everything else. To each person who hears this, when they hear it, will be the farthest point forward in human history to you the moment that you hear this. There are simply too many life forms filled with work, research, and discovery and knowledge to gain specific knowledge on every subject. People may only find 1 or 2 that they become truly adept in. So, in the face of our current age and the insurmountable tidal wave of misinformation, we have to ignore these large swaths of reality to maintain a sane sense of personal direction. But as we try our best interpersonally to maintain this direction, we become defensive, hardened in our ways, less discerning of challenges to our worldview, pursuing a flawed practicality that forces other people to play along with our realities and face discomfort or even harm in the process. It's abuse. Anyone who forces you to partake in their charade, who refuses to come to the table with logic, is abusing you, because they have rejected the concept of communication. And yet, we all fall into this to very small extents, as it is a tightrope for any sane sense of direction, and a true understanding of the world that you live in, especially when there's so much to know. The problem isn't when you're wrong. The problem isn't even that sometimes people abuse people. It's that when you do something wrong, how do you respond to it? The problem is when you're dishonest with yourself. White lies snowball, especially the ones you tell yourself. From David Hume's Treatise on Human Nature, Book 1, all the materials of thinking are derived either from our outward senses or from our inward feelings. Here he distinguishes the impression of something from the idea of it, similar to the signified signifier that we discussed earlier. The impression is the vivid biological reaction to external stimuli. The brain compiles and processes this information, sometimes even acting without the time that we need as conscious beings to think and weigh something. Our body's moving before we've even thought. If you were in school and ever played a sport or anything and had like a ball coming your way, you weren't paying attention, you were zoned out, and yet you still managed to dodge or catch it. Or awkwardly realizing you've been staring at someone in public for like 30 seconds when actually you just zoned out, and then whenever you come to, you sort of, oh, and then you look away. But what do we do once we come to our senses? Like if someone were to spook us on accident and we scream in fear in their face, we apologize to the person who accidentally frightened us because we know they didn't mean any bad intent, and our bodies responded before we did. If we're staring, we feel a little awkward and then divert our gaze. It's the same with a lie. When our brain gives us the information, but we hold back our skepticism or overplay it, rather than honestly assessing the information that we've been presented, we know that we aren't being fair with ourselves. We know, objectively, rationally, that whenever we're trying to justify to ourselves all of these actions, we're looking for a way to justify A equaling not A. That is the rot and weakness that humans either conquer or let conquer themselves until they are indistinguishable from beasts. Not real beasts, mind you. The things we associate with the word beast philosophically. In Aristotle's Politics, I think this will do a fine job of sourcing what I'm getting at with people who use their mind to deceive themselves intentionally. And why man is a political animal, in a greater measure than any bee or gregarious animal, is so clear. For nature, as we declare, does nothing without purpose, and man alone of the animals possesses the logos. Now, the original translations interpret this Greek word logos as speech. You see the same word with the famous Greek scriptures, like John 1:1. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. In this case, Logos is translated as word. Logos in the Greek refers to word, speech, message, account, reason, utterance. There's one thing that holds all of these definitions together, and that's really what Logos actually is in its context. The Platonic philosophy that shaped the usage of Logos had it stand in to represent something much more significant and clear. A sort of holistic description of perfect reason, a flawless rationality, the ability to cut through the deception and see reality, not from your own flawed perspective, but as it truly is. The Logos is but an unachievable perfect ideal in which we all strive for. And striving for Logos necessarily leads us to better our lives, as again, stronger coherence of reality allows for more effective use of reality and the production of resources. So Aristotle is saying something that, while we know today is not scientifically accurate, is still compelling, even to those who act as anti-empiricists. He's saying that the thing that separates man from animal is the fact that we do not merely respond and react to external stimuli, but we experience, observe, and make decisions about it. We have families. We sacrifice ourselves for the ones we love to frivolous tasks for the joy of it. Aristotle said what separates man from nature is the mind. The logos, the spoken word, the thought made flesh, that consciousness made home on the material plane. Plato, who was Aristotle's mentor, who was mentored by Socrates, who Plato writes about, saying, in Plato's Apology 38a, the unexamined life is not worth living. And this was said as Socrates is giving his statements to the court, who had ruled death penalty by poison if he continues philosophy, continues using logic, logos, to dismantle the faulty authorities and government of the time and the elephant-led ideologies. They were sick of the fact that Socrates could effectively tell them that the emperor had no clothes in such a way which was apparent to anyone who listened because it was inherently true. Of one who speaks for the truth, even when risked by the most animalistic parts of ourselves, who only account for momentary power. This was basically the cornerstone of why people argued humans and animals were different forever. However, the last 200 years of science has been an unceasing tidal wave continuously of experiments showing that a massive percentage of animals in fact actually do have rational capabilities. We have documented language and syntax and grammar. Of course, I'm not a biologist, but Erica of Gutsick Gibbon has a lot of videos expanding on this topic, and I would humongously recommend her videos. I've basically seen every one of them, and I believe she's working on her PhD right now, if she doesn't already have it, in primatology. Many species have their own functional syntax. grammar, and language, both from spoken sounds and hand signs. For those without either, we still see things. Crows will solve logic puzzles with sticks and water displacement in order for them to reach food, and the only thing they have to work with is a beak. Yet, with brains that are that small, they are able to fly, analyze their environments, and solve complex logical problems to reach decided goals. As humans, I can't get too excited about the current batch. We have a rising fascism across the world, which is defined by its bullish anti-empiricism, until the world burns itself out, possibly on the bodies of innocents and good people, hopefully not me, crushed to bring the fall. So, we discover other animals can think. And one of our largest waves of politics are vague rebellions against the concept of reality itself. That is why we are losing humanity's critical knowledge. Not enough people are being taught even how to think. The fundamentals behind our fundamentals. People are taught the empty husks of tradition, while the principles that made those practices important are completely forgotten to time. Make sure the part of you that you don't control doesn't hijack your life from you while gaslighting you in the process. That internal monologue that we all have is not the voice of God. Don't put your toddler in an oven. Think about the truth and verifiability of everything you see and hear. Be cautious with conviction and humble in error. Especially with modern technology and 20 years deep into the most advanced market analysis of human behavior we've ever seen, people are spending trillions of dollars to find ways to manufacture your consent before they gouge you, and then blame you for being upset over why they robbed you. Or maybe they'll blame like an immigrant or something. The elephant and the rider don't always get along. They may never even truly understand one another. But taking the effort to understand one's own body, psychology, what causes emotions to well up within you, you need to do this. Why? It's self-evident. These hard questions can reveal massive weights on our backs that we didn't realize we had, but feel afraid to let go. Interrogating those things can resolve them or improve our ability to cope or overcome these hang-ups. In some cases, these emotions may be important or positive for giving you a practical purpose and a sense of self. The point is to be as well equipped as you can, not to be sucked into a scam or a cult, and not to give away to thoughtless tribalism and unsubstantiated bias. The only people who don't benefit from your due diligence are the people trying to abuse you. There are a lot of people who are just deeply confused, and a lot of abused people who cling to truth-seeking associated labels, to cling to their tribe, to cling to the little that they've ever had or understood, but they almost always amount to social in-group. In a society devoid of third spaces, people get their interaction via personality cults. But let's recenter again. I stated earlier, white lies snowball, especially the ones that you tell yourself. It's not a moral failing. Our brains, almost in necessity to it, automatically, from time to time, do so. And a part of us is always aware of it, as a blind spot being shined upon. That's why we get defensive. There's an unresolved issue with our understanding of our reality, the information of a situation, or any number of other ideas. We convince ourselves our whole lives is not important to really interrogate because it doesn't change much about our lives, but it changes everything. It changes why you live. Responding rationally and level-headed and interrogating the cause may help make adjustments to avoid these feelings in the future. Life forces us into timed decisions without the full information, and everyone is bound to make mistakes, ones they regret even. But we can only get back on track when we can admit that we took a turn and aim towards correcting it. And I'm speaking interpersonally here, just about me and my body, you and your body, us controlling ourselves. But that's the foundation. It either is A or not A. If there was a foundation for a house, this would be it. If there was a house you could build on rock instead of sand, this would be it. You zone out, you have a detailed inner monologue while spacing out on a multi-hour drive, you get invested into an idea while on a run. When you walk and see a store, if words in your native language are present, then your brain can decode and translate, sometimes instantaneously from shape recognition alone. Logos. Words, language, fonts, our brains can adapt to extremely dense nuance, as long as there's a logical through line holding it together. Even the cadence and frequency of inconsistencies become second-hand or intuitive as language acquisition becomes stronger. Take the English language as a prime example. When describing something in English, we typically follow 9 cases for order of operation in describing it. 1, the quantity. 2, the opinion or quality. 3, the size. 4, the age. 5, the shape. 6, the color. 7, the nationality. 8, the material. And 9, the purpose or qualifier, often the primary noun involved. Now, maybe I learned this in kindergarten, but every time this is brought up to friends who learned English secondhand, they talk of how stupidly specific grammar rules are. But the most common reaction I see to English natives when I bring this up, if they haven't heard of it, is a disbelief, followed by a couple of fun examples. A decidedly unfriendly, sharp, crooked smile. A lovely big old wooden statue with painted dark blue pants. Now, of course, there's room to play with the grammar, and if it makes sense, you can even intentionally do so in order to make specific points or implications, to show loyalties and geopolitical leanings, to make an artful point in a story or poem. Argumentation is messy, precisely because the brain sorts experiential information reactively. Language is a highly complex series of sounds associated with concepts with loose shared definitions denoting intent based on vocal flair and emphasis. It is but a practical tool to discuss ideas. Argumentation is the point of solidifying your ideas into, at best, able to be distilled to pure mathematics. Argumentation is the point of solidifying your ideas into their best forms. We most often see this in logical syllogisms. If A equals B, and B equals C, then A equals C. This follows easily because the rule of identity requires whatever A is equal to apply to itself. For example, if we had a very simple, 7th grade math problem or something, and we only knew that B equals 5, how do you find what A and C are worth? We would know A and C are both worth 5 because the entire equation is just this equals this equals this. The issue is ensuring the truth claims of the argument, which can be done through terms of validity and soundness. Validity is easy enough. It is just to be logically consistent. There's, of course, a lot of places to split hairs, but those hairs do indeed split. Does the conclusion C follow from the premises A and B? This addresses the claim's possibility. No statement of truth is made, just verifying that it is logically intelligible. It is something that can be responded to sensibly because it itself makes sense. It makes no truth claim about reality, but instead an abstract scaffolding made of the logic that builds our reality. The soundness, on the other hand, is a judgment of how the premises bear out on reality. So if you say, premise 1, I can breathe underwater. Premise 2, I spend hours underwater every day. Then conclusion, I could easily live my life underwater. Now, logically, actually yes. If you can breathe underwater and regularly spend long times under it, of course you could potentially live underwater. It doesn't seem to be anything stopping you in this circumstance. The issue is the soundness, the truth of the claim. Upon the person attempting to breathe underwater, they would start choking or even drown. So how do we build a large enough library of sound knowledge when reality will always contain things that we have yet to discover or understand? Well, that's what science is. The scientific method is an attempt to rigorously write down experiments and results over and over and over, dozens and hundreds of more scientists practicing and repracticing and recreating the same experiments under the same conditions with the same variables, just so they can see if they get the same results. Because if they do, then it verifies it. Verifying or contradicting factual claims from largely disconnected groups of people who are all experts on it ensure that a small fraction or a few handful of extremely biased people don't manage to get their information past reality. And we should consider that while human errors are bound to happen, obviously, our whole collection of research have each case peer-reviewed, often by other anonymous peers, often only a job given to people who don't even know who the person submitting the work is. And after corrections, changes, or just peer review, Something is finally considered a breakthrough and accepted as the consensus because nobody can reliably prove it wrong. Then, when someone comes up with a better explanation that does in fact show an error in the previous one, we quickly adopt to that one. Knowledge becomes the front line of human understanding, like fresh juice filtered through a sieve, leaving all the particles and seeds behind. We have hundreds of people independently doing the same things and getting the same results. If someone plays with a variable, makes a mistake, or makes a breakthrough in the process, all of this will be brought to life in the papers, and further expanded upon, reconsidered, or even cited when relevant to discussion. Under this circumstance, with all of these variables, it is predictable that we will make assumptions that we later learn are wrong, which is the point of interrogating those, because perfect logos is not attainable. But the more of a grasp that we have on it, the better the world becomes for everyone. If our footing is discovered to be less sure than we hoped, we move our feet to a safer spot with no hesitation, because fundamentally logos is the practical. It is the very basis for practicality. It is the force which reaches into chaos and sows it into reality. But yet, even with this house metaphor, anything can mean everything to us, if we let it. That us is the part of you in control and the elephant. Your body's dysregulations, which appear in different ways and different forms to every person who's ever lived, are the largest force competing for the version of you that you want to be. The elephant isn't a dark or bad version of yourself, similar to the mischaracterization I thought Peterson made on Jung's shadow in my last video. The elephant can go much farther, handle more dangerous environments, and keep the rider mostly out of reach of trouble. We never have to think about breathing because of the elephant. The biological, physical regulations of our body. We never have to actively think of which compounds to deploy to digest our food after each meal, or to force us into states of nausea and diarrhea to force us to expel poisonous or toxic things detected when we get food poisoning. Our body, in all its stupid flaws, is an absolutely incredible thing that we rely on more than it relies on the part of us that we associate with, that thinks that it is self-perceptively free. The you that rationalizes ideas, that considers or focuses. The you that listens and talks. The you that solves problems. Even then, the better you get at things, the less input the rider needs to give the elephant. Riding a bike, driving a car, skating, our rate at which we can do equations or tasks or physical activities increases with our intuitive familiarity gained from greater and greater pools of data to synthesize. They become so familiar that they aren't thought about, they're just intuitive. Like a good foreman who can, at a glance, tell a board is a 1/4 inch too short. The elephant can elevate our rider selves to farther destinations than we could ever dream without it. So, in that way, it does resemble a shadow. We must take control of our lives. And that starts with taking control of ourselves. There couldn't be a more important thing for people to have a stronger grasp of. A person's grasp of reality obviously has ripple effects outwards. It's only responsible to make sure that your grasp is solid, because you affect other people. You live around other people. I hope to hear your thoughts, or other topics that you'd like to see me go more into. I'm not a formal scholar, but the merit of my words are in the truth of them. And I would hope that you take some time to reanalyze yourself and those in your life. And since this information is literally good for every single person to know, I would also appreciate for any support in liking or sharing the video, as well as financial assistance on Patreon and Ko-fi. Also, follow me on Blue Sky for other updates. I hope this gave you a lot to think about. I hope this helped somebody. And I also just generally think this is, very important for literally everybody to know.